Professor Anantaram with us today, and we are so happy to have him with us. He is a master in his area, and mainly he works in natural language processing. So welcome to you, sir. A very warm welcome to you. And we'll be starting our first session with Professor Anantaram. In just 1 minute, we are starting it.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can hear you well.
Okay. Good morning, everybody, and
yeah.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Professor Ashutosh Kumar and Dr. Sarika Jain for inviting me. Can you see my screen, or is it not visible?
Not the screen, sir. Yeah, now it is here, but with your permission, kindly allow me to provide a very brief introduction, at least for 2 minutes.
Sure. Thank you.
We have with us Dr. Anantaram. I can see he has received his MSc from BITS Pilani and PhD degree from IIT Bombay. He has 39 years of research experience and was a principal scientist in TCS Research. He specializes in application of artificial intelligence techniques in real-world systems, and his areas of expertise include knowledge representation, reasoning, knowledge-based verification and validation, natural language interfaces, and integrating AI techniques in business applications. He has over 40 international research publications and also 4 patents in AI research. Currently, he is a visiting faculty member at IIIT Delhi and also a consultant with TCS. He is also the Vice President of the India chapter of the Association for the Advancement of AI and an active member of ISO IEC Committee for Standardization in the area of AI. He was a member of the Government of India's core working group on metadata and data standards for e-governance applications. Welcome to you, sir. Please, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the nice introduction, and good morning to everybody. So we will I'll take a slightly divergent view in this. We should talk about trustworthy AI, and there are a lot of sessions in this workshop on trustworthiness and explainability. And you will find how semantic web technology becomes very important in producing good explanations and very good kind of interpretations of the AI decision-making space. So I hope you can all see my slide and can hear me clearly. If there's any problem, let me know, and then I may have to switch from one service provider to the other service provider.
Definitely, sir. Please go ahead. And do you allow the participants to speak in between and unmute themselves to ask queries?
Definitely. Yes, definitely. Everybody whoever wants to ask a query, please do unmute yourself and ask a question if you have. And I'm open to any time. I mean, it's a discussion that we'll have.
Fine,
Is it
sir.
okay?
Thank
Can
you.
Yeah, can you hear? Can you see my slides? That's very
Yes,
important
sir.
for me.
Very well.
Okay.
Very well, sir.
So good morning.
And
Okay.
I'll be there all the time. I'll let you know wherever we find any problem.
Sure. Thank you. So we will look at trustworthy AI. Let me give you a brief overview. All the slides, all the material in these slides are not all self-produced. So that's a clarification. And some of the slides are taken from various sources. Okay, so why the agenda for this talk is why is trustworthiness of AI systems important? And why is it become so important nowadays? What is meant by trustworthiness? And what are some of the important approaches and algorithms for trustworthiness? And why should we look at this area now? So we all have heard a lot about AI systems. AI systems has been around for almost 50 years now. Okay, since 1959. And trustworthiness actually in AI systems has always been around. Okay, every time an AI system was developed, people were concerned about how accurate it is, how trustworthy it is it dependable, etc., etc. But now it has become more prominent and cognizable because so far AI systems I mean, if AI systems were traditionally designed for organizations to use. But now AI systems have become more and more, applicable directly for human beings. I mean, influencing people directly. For example, we have recommendation systems. When we buy something, it recommends some other products. Okay. Then there are other systems which do prediction of various things, etc., etc. So it has started affecting people. And that's why the trustworthiness of AI systems has become an important topic now. And initially, as we all know, AI systems were for game playing and planning and all that. But now what has happened is AI systems are directly affecting and influencing people, their lives, their reactions, their legal decisions, the medical decisions, etc. So this has become a very, very hot topic. And I'm sure all of you know about it and have seen lots of papers in this area. So in this talk, what I'll do is I'll give a very quick overview of trustworthiness and some of the techniques is what we'll discuss. Okay, so you must have heard about the AI system, which was used in the US to decide whether somebody should given parole or not. Okay, and there was a study which was done, which found that the AI system was having a bias against blacks. Okay, this was in the US, and the AI system sort of, reflected the bias which was there because the system was designed from the data which was gathered, and the data itself had some people's biases inside it. So this work was done in 2016, and a paper was published which showed that if two people, a white person and a black person, had they were arrested for same petty thefts, okay, the black person was rated as higher risk rather than the white person, and this person was given parole earlier. I mean, he was let out on bail earlier as compared to this person. So there the bail is called parole. Okay, so he was rated low risk, but this person was she was rated at higher risk. But what happened is this person actually went back and did a crime again. And similarly here, again, as compared to a black person, both were arrested for drug possession. And again, the white person was given bail earlier than the black person. And this was recommended by the AI system. So the ProPublica publication, which was published, made a very important point that a guy who was molested who had molested a small child every day could come out as low risk because he has a job, because the AI system was looking at, is this person stable or not? Okay. Whereas a drunk guy will look at high risk because he's homeless. I mean, so there are some drunks who are homeless and they were marked as high risk. Whereas this guy, the second guy, had never hurt a child. Whereas here, this person had hurt a child. And these things sort of, gathered a lot of steam. And they found that the white were given bail or parole earlier as compared to the African Americans. And this was what was found, that 23% of the whites did not reoffend, and they were labeled high risk, whereas 44% of the African Americans who were labeled high risk did not reoffend at all. There was no second try. So like this, a lot of things were done. And AI trustworthiness in AI systems, are they biased or not? All this became very important to check. So there was a bias in this AI system, and it was discriminating against people. Similarly, Facebook had invented an AI system which could converse with people and other systems. and they found that two AI systems which were conversing against each other invented their own language. They found that even non-grammatical sentences could between two chatbots. So you have one chatbot which is an automated chatbot and another chatbot, and found that ultimately the human beings could not understand the kind of language that was going on between them. Okay, so that was an area of concern. You must have heard of Microsoft's Tay. That Tay was a AI chatbot that was released by Microsoft, and within a day they had to shut it down because what happened is Tay was released and people could play around with Tay, and people started abusing Tay. So what Tay was programmed was it will take the latest set of tweets and start tweeting it again. Okay, so what it found that a lot of people started abusing it. It started responding back with lots of abuses, and it became more and more, and it caused a huge damage to Microsoft's reputation, and so they had to take it down. So this is what Microsoft said. The AI chatbot Tay is a machine learning project designed for human engagement. As it learns, some of its responses are inappropriate and indicative of the types of interaction some people are having with it. Okay, and they had to remove Tay, and after that they didn't release Tay at all. Okay, so because people started abusing it, and from an organization's chatbot, you cannot have no abuses coming out, and it's terrible. So obviously that system, the people who designed it didn't anticipate the kind of just a sec. Yeah, didn't anticipate the kind of interactions people will have. And they thought that when people have interactions with the system can respond with similar interactions. So that was a problem. Okay, so now let me try to play a Google video and see if it is shareable. I mean, so I just want you people to see this video. I don't know, you might have seen it already, but still, let me try. So. Are you somebody who's always Yeah, so let me see if I can. Are you able to see my video?
Yes, sir, we can see it.
Okay, can you that Sundar Pichai is can you hear it? That's the question. Can you hear it?
Sir, please increase the volume. No.
Can you hear?
No, sir. Sir, I have seen always we cannot hear to the video.
Yeah, just let me just see if it is feasible.
Okay.
Yeah, so let me just see just 1 second because I just wanted to
Fine, sir.
show that. Yeah, so let me see. It might be feasible. If it's not, then we'll skip that.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so let me just continue with this. I mean, let me stop playing the video and yeah. Okay, now. Okay, so let me stop playing that video. Okay, so can you see my regular screen? That is the PPT. Can you see my regular PPT screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is a video which Sundar Pichai has talked about this diabetic retinopathy.
Sir, Sir, one of the participants is saying to switch on the subtitles. Maybe the video could, we could see it then.
So
Dr. Kapil, could you speak? Unmute yourself and speak.
hello.
Yes, sir.
Sir, can
So
we
let's continue. I will
Okay,
stop. I mean, I'll continue. I'll just talk about the video and go ahead. Okay. So can you still hear me and see my screen? That's my question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We
Okay.
can.
So there is a video which you would like to have a look where Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, talks about AI system for diabetic retinopathy, which has been rolled out in Shankar Nethralaya in Chennai. And basically based on the retina scan, this system does, I mean, based on the retina scan, it predicts diabetes in a person. And actually, Sundar Pichai's statement says that this system is so good that it has got 76% accuracy, and 24 to 48 hours before a person has a heart attack, it can predict a heart attack. Now, what about the remaining 24%? Suppose it gives a false positive. And suppose somebody comes in suddenly into this room and says that, hey, Google's diabetic retinopathy has predicted that you are going to have a heart attack in the next 24 hours. And assume that I'm not going to have a heart attack. Just hearing to that news itself, I'm going to have a heart attack. You know, if somebody comes and says that, my God, you're going to have a heart attack in the next 24 hours, it'll cause a lot of stress in me. So how reliable is this system? How trustworthy is this system? And we are concerned about it, definitely, that if it gives false positives, then that can cause all kinds of difficulties. And should we just take such systems into our life? And somebody else can game the system, you know, suppose there is this system at Shankar Nethralaya, then somebody who's a pathologist lab nearby can start sending false alerts to people and get them to the pathology lab to do all kinds of ECG and other tests, you know, treadmill tests and all that, and keep charging them. So the question is, how trustworthy is this system? Okay, so these are important things that can cause all kinds of problems. So let's look at trustworthiness. What is the definition of trustworthiness? If you look at a dictionary definition, you have in the noun, it says reliance on integrity, strength, ability, surety of a person or thing. And the verb says to rely upon or place confidence in someone or something. Okay, trust another person's honesty. So if we want really trustworthy systems, then we have to check whether we have confidence in its predictions, in its outputs, in its actions, decisions that it's taking. And we have to check whether it is lawful or not, whether it can be accurate or not, and whether it is explainable or not. So European Union has come out with a guideline for trustworthy AI, which says that there should be three important components for trustworthy AI, that it should be lawful, it should be ethical, and it should be robust. First of all, it should ensure compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. Okay, it should be ethical. Suppose I create an AI system for creating videos, okay, let's say movies and all that. It should not, suddenly include porn inside it or something like that. It should be lawful. It should be ethical. It should not, discriminate other people, and it should not create religious sentiments and other problems. It should be robust. It should be both technically and socially perspective. You know, it should be robust, that in case there are any attacks, it should be able to thwart the attacks. And each of these components are very necessary for making a trustworthy AI system. So trustworthy AI system is very important in all parts of life. especially since AI systems are getting more and more rolled out for, as they say, Aam Janta. Okay, so as it goes and affects people directly, it is important that it can lead to, it is important to check that it does not lead to any kind of problem and any kind of, uh, I mean, consequences which are undesirable. Okay, so uh, Guy Mong Lee had talked about trust in this context. He said that trust is basically, you can view it as faith, belief, confidence, and dependence on somebody or something. Okay, I trust you, or you trust me, or I trust a friend of mine, I trust my family members. So we have faith, belief, faith in the person. We have belief that the person will stand up for us. We have confidence in the kind of decisions that the person takes, and we depend on them. And we know that they are some of our I mean, friends and family members on whom we trust, on whom we have a lot of trust, are stable, they are reliable. Okay, and similarly, we can use this for AI systems, that you can have you can view it on faith, you can view it on stability, you can view it on reliability, you can view it on stability, scalability, safety, robustness, and then you can check whether it is accurate, consistent, and uh, what is its availability. Suppose I have an AI system which suddenly goes off in between, okay, then I cannot rely on it. So that is also, that is the availability of the system, okay, and explainability. How can it, can it explain its decisions or not? If I am interacting with my friend and my friend asks me something, okay, a particular decision, and I just give him a decision without explanations, the friend will not be able to appreciate the decisions, right? And he'll say that why are you saying this? And if I don't explain, the trustworthiness reduces. So this diagram here depicts trustworthiness. So there is a person who uh, there's a truster and there's a trustee, and the trust is the relationship between the truster and the trustee, and there is an environment, okay, which can influence this entire thing. So this area, okay, is the trustworthiness which we are going to look at. So the AI system will be the system which we are going to trust, and it's the system on which we want to evaluate the trustworthiness. And human beings, organizations, societies could be the truster on that system. And this is the area which is very hot nowadays, the trustworthiness of AI systems. Yes, there are threats, there are vulnerabilities, there are risks which change with the environment, which can cause problems for evaluating the trustworthiness. So I would stop here in case there's anybody who has any questions, comments, observations, or anything to say for a second, and then we'll continue. I hope you can still hear me and can see my screen.
The participants are allowed to unmute. So if you are really feeling something to ask, please go ahead.
Sir, I want to ask one, or I want to share one feeling that I am feeling that are these issues only related to feature extraction and engineering, or they are related to classifiers also?
Yeah. So it is all kinds of to classifiers, to decision-making systems, to prediction systems. Yes, definitely. In fact, a lot of work has been done on classification systems and also other kinds of prediction systems. Yeah. Sequence prediction
Let me,
systems.
sir, actually, I have a little bit thought like in general, whatever we AI system we make, especially a classification or identification system, then we have one means in the deep learning, the feature extraction and classification is go in one go. But in case of other things, like we do a feature extraction manually and engineering, and then we classify. So does these problem falls in the area of feature extraction engineering, or they come to classifiers as well?
Yeah, yeah. So this is for all aspects. So see, if feature extraction is not appropriate, then it can affect the decision making. Even if the feature extraction is appropriate, the system engineering decisions that we take, we can construct use a transformer network. We can construct binderized neural network. So we can construct even traditional AI systems. So traditional AI systems, let us say that it's not machine learning systems also. Traditional AI systems also need to be trustworthy and explainable and all that. For example, I developed a crew rostering system for Indian Airlines in 1991. Okay, actually developed it and rolled it out in Palam Airport, Delhi. Okay, it was actually running. It was an AI system which will assign crew for flights. How trustworthy is that system? Okay, and how good is that system in terms of accuracy, in terms of disruption management, and actually there too, there can be lots of legal issues. Okay, so we have to evaluate the trustworthiness of. So this was in 1991, which I designed and developed and rolled out at Indian Airlines, and that time it was not machine learning based. It was all rule-based systems and many other aspects. Rule-based systems optimization, multi-objective, multi-criteria optimization, and there also the question of accuracy was there. The completeness question was there. How consistent it was there. The certainty, the safety, the reliability, all this was very important. And what we are saying is for traditional AI systems as well as modern deep learning systems, this entire aspect of trustworthiness is not just limited to feature engineering, but also to the prediction task, to also to the decision making task, to also coming out with the planning tasks and everything else. So if I make a robot today, how reliable is it? How accurate is it? If I make all these medical robots, to do incisions and all that, will it fail? And the kind of decisions it can make. So there are lots of things which go into it, and it's not just limited to feature engineering. I hope I have been able
Yes,
to answer a part of your question. I think it'll get a little bit more clear as we go ahead.
yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let's go ahead. So these are the trustworthiness aspects: explainability, transparency, interpretability, accountability, accuracy, safety and security, completeness, verification, validation, reliability, availability, robustness, okay, fairness, bias, and uh, for the time being, just leave out scope. Okay, we'll talk about many of these things in today's lecture. I'll start with bias. I'll start with fairness and bias, and then quickly go down this from bottom up. I'll go to the top. Okay, where we go up to explainability. So generate explanations. Explainability is to generate explanations. Transparency is to able to trace out why the AI model performed the way it did. Interpretability is basically generating explanations that are human understandable. Okay, in the context. So if I build a diabetic retinopathy system, then the kind of explanation it generates should be understandable by the doctors and the patients and all that. So different levels of explainability. Then there is accountability, accuracy, accountable who's responsible. You have heard of Google's automated car and Tesla's car, which actually killed a person. Okay, who was responsible for it? Then accuracy, how accurate is it? And what is the safety, the completeness, verification, validation, reliability, and in traditional AI systems, we have been doing all of this. That's why I said that when we used to build AI systems, we did verification, validation. Okay, I have built a lot of AI systems, real world AI systems. I built one for Indian Airlines, one for Indian Oil, two for Indian Oil, one for Asian Development Bank, all rolled out. And these things required verification, validation, accuracy, reliability, etc., etc. But now we have slightly different focus because there is fairness, bias, and all these things which have also come in and can directly affect people. So let's look at bias. Bias is basically systematic error in the data or model that can possibly influence a decision in the decision-making process. So there is some error in the data or model that can influence a decision. We saw that in that parole prediction system, that is the bail prediction system of US. There was a bias in the system's decision-making process. Okay, there are 180 types of cognitive biases that have been identified, and that list is there in the Wikipedia, and we try to address some of these, not all of this, but some of these. So bias manifests when it plays a role to influence decisions that discriminate against a privileged or unprivileged group, intentionally or unintentionally. So this is the definition which I have been giving. I use in all my lectures, which is bias manifests when it plays a role. So bias can be there. Bias will always be there, but sometimes the bias may not actually manifest itself. Sometimes the bias is actually required for running a system. Okay, so if you really want to run a system, you may require some bias. So not all bias is bad. Some bias is good actually. Yeah, did anybody have a question? So bias manifests when it plays a role to influence decisions. And I have listed some of the papers there, and from where these things are quoted. Fairness. So bias is one thing and fairness is another thing. Okay, so people normally have a lot of people make a mistake of saying that if it is not biased, it's fair. That's not true. Bias is one thing and fairness is another thing. Fairness is a complex concept, okay, and not just theoretical differences. It depends on the context. Okay, it's a complex concept and depends on the context. Okay, sometimes you may not be fair, but that's very important for running the system. For example, we are all teachers in our colleges and universities, and a lot of students apply to the colleges and universities, and not everybody is granted admission, right? So then somebody can say you're not being fair, but you're being fair, because if you granted everybody admission, then it's not going to function. You can't grant everybody, A grade. If you grant everybody A grade, then you're not differentiating you're not being fair to the students who have put in the effort and have actually come forward and have actually studied, right? So fairness is a very complex concept, and no AI system can be universally fair or unbiased. These are two different terms. Please remember that fairness is different from unbiased, but fair is, we'll look at it. So there are 20 definitions of fairness, 20 different mathematical definitions of fairness, and we saw that 180 different types of cognitive bias. So there is a difference. There are 180 types of cognitive bias, and there are 20 different types of fairness. There might be more now, because this is a slightly dated slide. So there might be more than 25 or 30 different types of fairness. And when we choose one, we violate some other aspect. In other words, it's impossible to be fair to all parties. And what is fairness? Fairness is the measure of providing equal opportunity to the various groups, the privileged group and the unprivileged group. Okay, the protected group and the unprotected group in the decision making of the AI system. Okay, so this Google's diabetic retinopathy system should not, based on Indian patients, it should not discriminate between Indian patients and American patients and European patients and all that, and cannot have, say, 76% accuracy for Indians, whereas 99% or 90% accuracy for Americans and all that. And it should not, it should be fair to all parties. So similarly, other systems, parole systems or any other systems, should be fair. Okay, so before I'll just again, in case there is any question, I'll stop. Otherwise, I'll continue. So if there's anybody who has any question or comment or any observation is also welcome. Okay, so Harini Suresh and John Gutak put it very nicely in their paper, which they showed is basically AI model can be viewed as a set of mapping as a series of mapping functions. So you have the real world input features, the real world XN, and the real world predictions. Okay. So we have the real world XN and the real world predictions. And from that, we collect a large sample, a small XN, and a small set of predictions. Like let us say these are 130 crore Indians, So you cannot take all the 130 crore Indians data. So you take a large sample, XN and YN, okay? And this is what we are trying to model into the AI system. And then when XN is being modeled, it is done by the machine learning engineers. And what they actually represent into the AI system is XN dash. And the YN is also represented as some YN dash. And then we are trying to check whether this ML model is predicting properly against this sample. Okay, so this is the function f. This is the real function f, which should map xn to yn, and this itself is a representative of the real world xn. You can't capture all the data in the world, right? So you take a large sample, and this is the function fn, f, which is mapping xn to yn, and this is the actual function which has been built, gn. Okay, because there is some system engineering process where not all these features are captured 100% accurately. And then that's where we check out with a validation set and test set and all that. Okay, so we are checking this function g. Okay, whether this function g is representing f in the real world. And then what happens is the real world data can change. So this is a distribution d, and the real world data can change. So there's a distribution d dash, which will happen. Okay, and we have to check whether this function g, which has been learned, works well in this d dash or not, and comes out with the right kind of prediction. So it's a very complex problem. And Harini Suresh and John Gutak published a paper which was very insightful, where they said that model building has a lot of stages. So you have this data generation, then you select a population from that, and then you do measurement on that, and you create the data set, and then you train. Okay, you break the data set into train and test and all that, and you build the system. So there is already bias in the real world. Okay, there is historical bias. We all have bias, right? All of us have bias, and the society has bias. The organizations have bias. The countries have bias. So that data is already there, and that cannot be changed. So the data is already there. So there is some historical bias which is going to come in. Then we can't take the full population of the world, right? We can't take 7 billion people, 7.5 billion people data. So you take a good sample representation from that. Just a sec. So you could take a good representation from that. But again, I might have taken data from cities and towns, but villages might have been left out. So when you actually collect people to go to the villages and collect the data or data from the villages, maybe error prone. Sometimes the person is sitting in the center, is unable to go, but still he has to produce a report. So there is a lot of approximation which is done in representation bias. Okay, so I may have selected the wrong groups. I cannot sample the whole set of groups. So there is a representation bias in addition to historical bias. Then the kind of measurement I do on that, suppose I bucketize people into teenagers, middle age, and senior citizens and very senior citizens. Then there is, I'm bucketizing it. So there's a measurement bias in that. Then the data set is again split into training and test and all that. And then there is the model which is developed. And the model may have a set of models inside it. So there is aggregation bias, okay? Because there may be more than one model. I might be averaging certain things. I might be taking the maximum of something. I might be finding the standard deviation and variance and all that. And there is the evaluation bias. So, and then this model about, so there's all kinds of bias, and historical bias is basically a nominative concern. and it's a fundamental structural issue and can exist even if perfect sampling and feature selection is done. Representation bias occurs when sampling from a population because there can be different distributions. And if I take few samples from villages as compared to the samples from the cities, then there is a representation bias, right? Because we lack data points for some of the input space, and the function will be more uncertain of the XY pairs. If I have, let's say, 30 people from the village as compared to 30,000 people from the cities, then the system is going to be more biased towards the city kind of data. Okay, so representation bias can occur for various reasons because of sampling methods, because of population of interest has changed. I mean, some people cannot be surveyed or the data cannot be collected. Then there is measurement bias, which is depends on the granularity of the data, depends on the quality of data. Okay, and and it depends on the kind of task which I'm trying to do. So there is measurement bias. Then there is aggregation bias when we try to do one size fits all. Okay, so if we try to do the same model which applies for cities, if you apply the same model for villages where there are no basic infrastructure, then it's no point building a really great road into the village if you don't have the healthcare structure in it. So if you can address the healthcare structure first and then build the Yamuna Expressway kind of thing right through the near the village or something like that, then it makes sense. So there is, if you try to do one size fits all, that's a problem. And if the AI system tries to do that then it's going to lead to a problem. Then there is evaluation bias, because when you evaluate, it may happen that the evaluation doesn't represent the target population. Okay, I tested on cities, but I didn't test on towns and villages and farmers. Let's say farmers and let's say those who work in the manufacturing industry. So they have greasy hands, and Aadhaar system faced this problem. Aadhaar system did a very good biometric evaluation, but when certain people's biometric it just couldn't take because their hands were having cuts, there was greasiness which could not be removed. They have been working so hard that their fingers had lots of cuts and all that, and we couldn't get very good samples from that. So there was a problem, and the Aadhaar system ran into a problem for biometric when it was being rolled out in certain areas. Okay, so it's a very important problem that we have to address. So I'll get into fairness. If there's no observations or comments on this, and we'll just look at some statistical fairness issues. So fairness is some criterion that should be met for the algorithm to be considered fair. Okay, so fair across groups. So if I say, if I take the people in India, and if I have an AI system which is going to predict whether the system is going, the people are going to have health-related problems. Okay, it needs to be fair across various groups. It should not start, predicting that the city people will all get lots of health problems. There might be really good, healthy people even in the cities, and might be unhealthy people even in the towns and villages. Okay, so it has to be fair. It has to consider the right kind of attributes. And some of these attributes are sensitive attributes. For example, gender, caste, race, the kind of, say, religion, etc., can be very sensitive attributes. And these things can cause different kinds of groups to be formed, into that data set. So group independent predictions require that decisions that are made are independent of group membership. That is, it should not be biased towards males, or it should not be biased towards females, or it should not be biased towards the poor income group or the rich income group. It should not make such predictions if you are building a system which is going to work for the entire, let's say, the population of India. And it should be equal across groups. That is, it requires equal prediction metrics of some sort, which could be accuracy, true positive rates, false positive rates across groups. And that's called equal metrics across groups. And this was called group independent predictions. Okay. So it should be independent of the group in which the person is. So we'll just look at it. Then individual fairness requires that the decisions that are made are independent of the group membership. Okay, requires that individuals who are similar with respect to prediction tasks are treated similarly. So this is at the group level. Group independent predictions are at the group level, and these are at the individual level. That is, if I invert the feature from a poor low income group to a high income group, the same person's prediction should not change. Okay, let us say for admissions. Suppose I am having an AI system to decide admissions. Okay, it should not be based on the students, let's say, family income. Okay, of course, there are some organization objectives. Let's forget for the time being organization objectives. Suppose I take one individual. Let us take myself. Okay, Anantram. Anantram wants to study in, do a PhD again. It should not see whether I'm poor or rich and all that. And it should not change the prediction. If I change from low income group to high income group, it should not change the prediction. So individual fairness is different from group fairness. And causal fairness, okay, causality. So causality is another area in AI which is becoming more important. Okay. Okay, so fair algorithms are database methods such as data reweighting. We have been seeing this, upweighting examples. There are model-based methods. There are post hoc methods for generating fair algorithms. So you could, if we look at a AI system and find that it is biased and it's not being fair, then one can examine the data, and it might so happen that the thresholds may have to change. For example, generally, it has been observed that the males have a higher, their height is much more. Average male height is more than average female height in India, right? Now, the threshold for tall could be different for the males as compared to females. So you might do data, you might reset the data threshold, you may change the model, you may have different kinds of model, you could use model-based methods. So that is, the first one is called database methods, and then you could do in the model-based methods also. You can mask out a sensitive variable, you can emphasize a particular fairness objective, and then you have post hoc methods. After the prediction, you can try to equalize and say that, okay, this is even though it has rejected a particular application, I am going to reconsider that. So statistical fairness has been defined in Verma and Rubin in 2018. Okay, and let's say G is the protected sensitive attribute, which is to be considered, and X is all the other attributes. Okay, and Y is the classification. If S is the predicted probability and D is the decision. Okay, so we'll just go through this. So you have seen all this confusion matrix. You have got these true positive rates and false positive rates. So positive predictive value is true positive rate divided by true positive plus false positive. Like that. Okay, so we have seen all this, and this can be calculated very easily from the predictions on a test set, and then used for checking whether the AI system is fair or not. So you have at the group fairness, the probability of, this is the decision. Okay, the probability of D equals 1, given that G is the gender, let's say, or the sensitive attribute equals N. It's here. So in this example, we are taking gender. Okay, the probability of a decision being 1 for gender males should be equal to the probability of decision 1 for gender females. Okay, so we are here just taking a good, a simple example, and then if let us say 70% of the males will get the positive decision and only 40% of the females are getting positive decision, then there is a problem. Then the system is not being fair. Okay, if 70% of the males are getting positive decision and 71% of the females are getting positive decision, then it's a fair system. It may not be exactly equal, but nearly equal. Okay, so group fairness looks at probability of, what is the probability, prediction probability of D equals 1 given J equals M, and the prediction probability of D equals 1 given that G equals F. If they are the same or nearly the same, then we say it's group fairness. And predictive parity, which is also called the outcome test, is basically looking at probability of Y equals 1 given D equals 1. That is, what is the actual label? Given that predicted D equals 1 is the predicted label, and what is the probability of Y equals 1? How true is it? Okay, given for males and as compared to females. Okay, and similarly, that's basically this is called the positive predictive value, PPV. Positive predictive value. PPV stands for positive predictive value. Okay, so it's very interesting. So in the previous one, we just looked at the decision by the AI system, and then here we are looking at decision with respect to the actual real world decision. So that's so predictive parity should also be the same. And then you have predictive equality. Look at the false positive rates. The false positive rate should also be the same. That is, the AI is predicting 1, and whereas the actual real world is 0. That is it's a false positive. It should be the same for both the groups. So similarly, a false negative rate should be the same. Then you have equalized odds. Okay, that is probability of D equals 1. This is the prediction. Given the Y is either 0 or 1, the real world is 0 or 1, then G equals M for the gender M, and it should be the same as for the females. So it is making equal amount of correct predictions and equal amount of wrong predictions. Okay, so there are many of these things. I'll just quickly go through some of them, and we'll just go to other topics of trustworthy AI systems. So the overall accuracy equality is probability of D equals Y. D is the prediction, Y is the actual. For both the groups, males or females, should be the same. Okay, so there is overall accuracy equality. Then treatment equality, that is the false negative rates divided by the false positive rates for males or any group. No, let us say high income group. Here we are taking males and females because it's easier to relate to. Should be equal to false negative rates divided by the same ratio. Fn by Fp should be the same for males or females or protected group. So this is you'll say this is the protected group or the unprotected group, etc. Or privileged group, unprivileged group. All kinds of words are used for that. Okay, so then there is test fairness, where one looks at predicted probabilities and actual outcome. So what is the probability of Y equals 1 for this group versus the probability of Y equals 1 for the other group? Okay, so you can make any such calculations. Then there is something called calibration. Okay, how good is the accuracy with respect to confidence, probability of the confidence. So suppose I calculate the probability of the confidence of this. Okay, so I let us say I make for example, the Google diabetic retinopathy system. He says 76% accurate. Okay, suppose it is 76% accurate, and it is giving everything with a confidence of 0.5 or 0.4. Then it is 76% accurate, but its confidence is very low. No, it's 0.4. And so I cannot, it's not a well calibrated system. I cannot rely on it, right? So calibration is also a very, very important thing, which is gaining a lot of importance in trustworthy AI systems. Then there is fairness through unawareness. I'll skip some of this. Fairness through awareness. There's lots of things which are there in fairness itself. So any questions or comments or observations so far before I get into bias? Okay. So I hope you can. Yeah, I hope you can still hear me.
Yes, yes, sir, I can hear you.
Yes, sir.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah. Yes. Go ahead. Yes.
Sir, there is an implicit or imbibed bias in the data itself. So in this
Yeah.
very process of fabrication, say wherein we try to maintain a ratio of FP by FN, wouldn't mean that we are losing insight of the data, or we are introducing bias in the reverse direction. If we take the example of white and black.
Yeah. So see, so you're saying that there is a bias in the data, and if I try to equalize the data, then it'll come out with, which is like introducing bias into that. But see, I want my AI system to be unbiased. Let us say that is the objective. Okay, so then what I have to do is I may have to do more sampling. I may have to, like for example, let's take India's case. Okay, so let us say I build an AI system based on some survey of cities and villages. So if I take 3 lakh people from cities, 300,000 people from cities, and I take only say 30 or 40 data points from villages, that means I have not done enough survey of villages. So the AI system is going to be biased towards cities. Now, your question is, suppose I try to uh, make the AI system more unbiased. So I will be playing around with the data. Yes, you're right. So, but it depends on the objective of the system. If I have to make the system more fair to villages, then maybe I require to do more sampling of their data. I may need to actually go around and collect much more data, which might be tough, which might be difficult, but I may have to do then uh, different models for city and different models for villages. Okay, and then when it comes to village data, I should use a different model, which might be a regression model or something like that. Okay, or something else uh, with respect to the city model. You're right that I may be actually biasing the data, but it might be required to address the uh, objectives of the AI system. So there are 3 questions which comes in. Should the data be debiased? Should we create new classifiers that learn unbiased models? Or is it better to correct the predictions from the model? Okay, so one is to debias the data itself, but sometimes it may not be possible. The other way is to actually create different classifiers for different groups. Or the third one is to actually take the predictions and modify it. That even though it is saying don't admit this person, I might actually admit that person into the uh, into the class, because I might say that okay, I need to correct the predictions, especially the borderline cases. Okay, the borderline cases, I say okay, so I need to revise this. So let me do a different this thing. So there are 3 types of methods, and the burden is on the AI ML developers and the corporations which are using it, that they need to deal with these questions, and that becomes it's a difficult problem, because bias, as you said, bias, I might be introducing bias. Yes, true. And
Sir, can we go to the previous slide?
yeah,
Post the post hoc methods. If we go for the post hoc methods, we need to find out those people also, for those samples also, for which maybe we have to consider them again.
yeah. So post hoc methods might be to look at the data again, or I may just take the predictions and change the predictions. That is also there, in the sense that let us say that Google's diabetic retinopathy system, okay, and it's true, predicts some problem. And Shankar Netrala doctors are not just going to take it and just believe in it. Okay, they'll say, chalta hai. I went to a doctor sometime back with all kinds of medical reports. He looked at it and said, there's no problem. Though in the medical reports, all kinds of things were written. Okay, it was everything was in highlighted. This thing that iska liver gaya, ye gaya, wo gaya, and all that. And the doctor said, don't worry about all this. You are absolutely fine. Okay, so he's doing a post hoc method of correction, the predictions from the model. The model was predicting all kinds of things. I should have been dead some 10 years ago. But this model, he said, there's no problem. This human body is not so this thing. So he's basically doing post hoc methods of correction. He's not changing the data. So we can change the data. We can debias the data. We can create new classifiers. Okay, we can have a combination of all this. And as AI engineers, many a times we have to do a combination of all this. Okay, I mean 1991, which I built an AI system for Indian Airlines crew rostering system, had to be fair to all the pilots, even senior pilots, junior pilots, and all that. At the same time, it had to meet organizational objectives. Sometimes, the organizational objectives are so important that you have to have biased decisions. The senior pilots cannot go for night stop flights. Okay. Night stop flights are flights where you go from, say, Delhi to Chennai, Chennai to Singapore, and then Singapore you stop overnight and then come back. A senior pilot cannot do that, especially directors and all that, director operations. They are very senior pilots. They need to be in the office. Okay. So it will give a biased decision. It will give them a day return flights and all that. Okay, so it was required for the AI system to function correctly. So the junior pilots will complain that you are giving me only all those flights which are difficult flights. What is this guy? So once in a while we give to the seniors, very senior persons and all, lots of things. So database methods, model-based methods, and sometimes you have to do all of these. Sometimes, okay. Okay, so bias is basically a favorable label whose value corresponds to an outcome that provides an advantage to a recipient. For example, receiving a loan, being hired for a job, not being arrested. It's all bias. I mean, let us say two people go, A and B, with exactly similar qualifications. A gets admission, B does not get admission. And you'll find that B will complain, saying, what is this? I didn't get exactly the same qualifications and I didn't get, whereas A got it. So there must be some reason for that, right? So, or the system is biased. So these attributes are not universal. They are application specific. There is concepts of group fairness. There's concepts of individual fairness. There's context of fairness where you want to deal with unbiased, unwanted bias, all kinds of things. So Alexander Amin and others published a paper in 2019 which said, I found this interesting. They said that you see this definition. A classifier of theta x is biased if its decision changes after being exposed to the additional sensitive feature, that is f theta x is not the same as f theta x comma z. That is, let's say z is the sensitive attribute and you mask it. Okay, so it comes out with f theta x. And if I unmask that attribute and if it is not the same, then it's biased. Okay, or in other words, it's fair if the f theta is the function which is predicting given x. Okay, f theta x, if it doesn't change, then it's a fair classification. Okay, so I found this very interesting. Of course, x and z are used in the training, but if I mask it and if it's still coming out with the same decision, I'd say it's a fair decision. Otherwise, it's unfair. And there is a lot of work in mitigating bias. Okay, so probability of y equals 1 given that D belongs to unprivileged group divided by the probability of y equals 1 given that D belongs to the privileged group is called disparate impact. And if it is less than 80%, then there is a disparate impact. Let us say that this is probability of admission given that low income group divided by probability of admission given that high income group. If there's a difference of more than 80%, then there is a disparate impact. Otherwise, we will accept it because the low income group may not have been able to, put in extra hard work, etc., etc. So there is a threshold cap. Of course, this threshold can change, but there's a general standard of 4/5 or 80%. So there has been work which has been done in mitigating such bias. And let us say these are two groups, the blue group and the red group. And now the AI system has learned from this data that there is a blue distribution and a red distribution. So if a new person comes in and he has this feature, say 6.3, okay, then it is going to say that most probably this person is lying in this orange group and may give a prediction which is more favorable. Whereas here, if the person is having a feature value of 4.2, okay, then it's going to say, oh, it's in the blue group. So it can learn such things. And in order that it should not learn such things, there has been work which was introduced in a paper called Certifying and Removing Disparate Impact by these 4 or 5 people, which what it did was, it's a pre-processing technique. It takes the data. So what they do is, this is the actual distribution, okay, the input distribution, that you have one group and you have the second group. First group's data goes from say 2.9 to this thing with a peak here. And the second group's data starts from 4. This thing, let's say this is the income group, okay? So you can make out that this is from villages and this is from cities, let's say, just assume, okay? Or these are the IT people. Everyone says IT guys get a lot of money, but that's not true, okay? So this is the IT people and these are the non-IT people, let's say. So we can, in order that it should not make out, what you can do is you can actually generate data. You generate data for this group in such a way that its distribution goes up till there. So synthetic data you can generate, let us say. Okay. So if you do that, then both the groups cannot be made out. And even for the other group you generate data for this area. So you're biasing it, right? But the AI system will not be able to make out between these two groups and will give more fair predictions. So this is some work which they talked about. It's called a repair value of 1. And if you use a repair value of 0.8, then you can have both the groups in such a way that you repair it to 0.8 of each other, so that the AI system should not be able to distinguish based on the sensitive attribute. This is only on the sensitive attribute. Okay, you generate data only on the sensitive attribute in such a way that it's synthetic. And basically, if you have an AI system for admissions, it should not be discriminate between males and females, right? So let us say what it does is, it will give admission to people here and it should not be able to discriminate. So I generate synthetic data in such a way that I know that it won't give admission to these people, but it should not be able to discriminate between the blue group and the orange group. So this is disparate impact remover work which was published. And then the IBM guys have done a lot of work, okay, on individual bias detector. So their algorithm is like this. Okay, so what they do is they first train the classifier. You train the classifier on training set. Okay, let's say it's trained. Then on the validation set. So you train it on the training set. Then on the validation set, what you do? You start taking so validation set, you have the ground truth, right? So for validation set, when you have the ground truth, you start taking the predictions. And then you change the sensitive attribute and see if the prediction changes. If the prediction changes, then you mark it as biased. Okay, you learn a bias classifier. And then in the test set at runtime, you take a prediction and check it against that bias classifier. If it is biased so this is another model which is learned, bias classifier on the validation set. And on the test set, what happens is, if it gives a decision, okay, you check in the biased classifier if the decision was 0, and then you might change the decision. So this is a work which was published by the IBM guys in 2018. It became pretty important reference work in the AI literature. Okay, and it's referenced a lot. There was a lot of things which was so this is by the IBM Associates in 2018 bias mitigation post processing work. So this is the post processing. So the classifier runs the test and comes out with the decision, and I invert the decision. Okay, if it's there in the biased classifier, then I invert the decision. So interesting work. Then other mitigation mechanisms used decoupled classifiers. Then train separate classifiers for each group. Capture group fairness using a joint loss function. You can do transfer learning, and you can design your own loss functions, etc., etc. So I will again take a pause here. So we looked at fairness and bias, and now we'll just talk about robustness. But before I get into robustness, I'll pause in case there are any doubts, questions, comments, observations, anything which is there.
Sir, may I?
Yeah, sure.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, I wanted to ask one thing that if we say that the system is biased, but it become biased because we trained it on a biased set.
Yeah.
So is it not possible that we change our training set and make it unbiased? For example, say if it is about biasness between males and females, so we train the system only on the male set, and then it will treat the female set also accordingly, because within one set there will be no biasness. Is it not possible like that?
No. So there are many issues there. For example, if you just train on male set and try to apply on the female set, it may not work in all situations. For example, medical domain, the women's body is different from the men's body. There are different kinds of medical structures. I mean, different kinds of reactions, the different
Yes.
hormones and all that. So you cannot do that always. You have to train the system on both male data and female data. Otherwise, it won't perform properly. So we have to look at all the groups. Let's say pregnant women versus other women and all that, and you have to train it properly. And the thing is, if it is still being biased, then you have to look. See, it all depends on the organizational objectives also. So, for example, for the medical system, it is very important for me to train it on various groups, and I have to use it like that. Okay, even diabetic retinopathy, which Google has rolled out. There are people with bloodshot eyes. Okay, their eyes are bloodshot. And Google's they very proudly Sundar Pichai's claimed 76% accuracy and all that. When he came to India, I mean, when the system was rolled out in India, there were people who were bloodshot eyes, and it performed poorly. People who have had, cataract surgery. So cataract surgery, there was other problems. I mean, you just can't say it. So you can't. We have to train classifiers on all kinds of data, and the output of the data, if it is biased, then these are mechanisms to mitigate the bias. And of course, you can retrain it, but utna time nahi ho sakta hai. You may not have the resources, you may not be able to do this. So these are there. I hope it's clear.
So one question I want to ask again.
Yeah.
Actually, we have, you already told me that, and I also agree that the algorithmic and the data, both the parts have to have these all the attributes, all the properties like fairness, bias, unbiasedness, and so on and so forth. So, but as of now, we have talked, whatever we have talked is only related to the biasness in the data. So
No. It can also be predictions. I can change the predictions. This algorithm is on changing the predictions. I train it on a validation set, and then if the prediction is different, if it is biased in the validation set, then I can change it.
okay.
So I can. So this is the famous algorithm published by the IBM guys. Actually implemented in their IBM 360 fairness tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually implemented. IBM 360 Fairness tool implements a lot of algorithms for checking and detecting bias and fairness and mitigating and all that. And it's implemented. This is post processing.
Okay.
Sir, I have a query.
Yeah.
Sir, in the definition of a classifier wherein you introduce that Z parameter, is there a way to know that whether the attribute is sensitive or the most prominent one? So
Okay. Yeah,
is this the case that we are losing the accuracy of the model in the name of the fairness, and unnecessarily we are marking the most prominent attribute as a sensitive one?
Yeah. No. So basically, the organization has to decide which are sensitive attributes. For example, when we come to admissions, we should not distinguish between gender, males, females. It should not happen. So it's a sensitive attribute. It should not. Whereas if it is a medical system, it is very important. Gender is very important. You cannot leave gender. If you leave gender, then you're going to come out with wrong predictions. You're going to have wrong medication. Women's they require different kind of medication. Then again, age is important. If I give the adult medication to children, all kinds of problems will occur. Similarly, geriatric medicine, if I give the same medicine to very senior citizens, they'll have all kinds of problems. So age also matters, gender matters. It depends on the AI system. Okay. Whereas if it is pilots flying aircraft, it should not matter whether it's males or females. It should depend on their capability, their clearance, flight duty time limitations, the license, lots of things. The aircraft they are flying on, their capability, etc., etc. It should not depend on male and female. So it all depends on the system objectives and the kind of the context of the AI system. The semantic web technology will come in a lot useful in contextualizing many things.
But sir, in many times we do not know even the attributes. Even if we know the attributes in isolation, we may not be knowing that what would be the overall impact of interactions among them. So, like
Yeah,
if we
so-
take the example of the deep learning based systems, wherein we do not know for sure that which attribute is actually playing, or the interactions of which attribute is actually playing the major role in the determination of the overall accuracy of the model.
Yes, so we look at the output post hoc predictions, the output, and then see whether we need to train again or we need to modify the values. So this is more in that direction, this post hoc direction. So there are various things. I mean, it's that's what I said. There are three major mechanisms. There's post hoc methods, model-based methods, and database methods. And in all of these, lots of work have been done. So AI Fairness 360, if you do Google this, AI Fairness 360 by IBM, a lot of IBM people are there in that. You will find that the relevant paper. It's an old paper now. Old means two years old. Okay. And but even, I mean, in the trustworthy AI systems, the field is moving so fast that even 2 years is now called old. Okay. So let's go ahead. Robust AI is important because I've got other topics also to finish quickly cover about explainability. Robust is basically what is robust AI? There are three things. One is distribution drift, because the data can change and you may have new data coming in. Then there is invariances to small changes. For example, some data may not be available. No, sometimes I may not be able to measure in the even for a new patient coming in. For a new patient coming in, I may not be able to measure. I may not be able to take ECG. Let's see, or some CAT scan. I may not be able to do a CAT scan. Okay, because of the status of the patient. Okay, so will the AI system still be able to predict in that? Then there is adversarial attacks. Okay, so there are three things, and the AI system should be robust to that. And there's a lot of work which has been done again by IBM people and others. Data protection from data poisoning. They can be deliberate data poisoning attack. Okay, so I can deliberately change the gender of people or the age of people and see how the system goes crazy, and then use that to game the system. For example, Google's diabetic retinopathy system. can be understood by pathology labs around, and they can game the system in such a way that it keeps telling patients that you are going to have this heart attack, that heart attack, this is going to happen, तुम्हारा liver जाने वाला है, kidney जाने वाला है, all kinds of things, you know. And then the person will run to the pathology lab to get all kinds of blood tests done and all that. So I can game the system. So then basically it's not a robust AI system. Okay, so a disclaimer, I'm not against Google. I'm just using Google as an example here. I'm not fighting against Google right now. Okay, so just a example. So don't read me wrong. Okay, so domain adaptation, transfer learning, and adversarial attacks are lots of work which have been done in robust AI, and we'd like our systems to be robust systems. Okay, and we can use the given training set to learn the generation process, to learn the kind of distributions which are uncertain, and use that for building I mean systems. You can use people have used generative adversarial networks to generate adversarial data and then train the system out of distribution, whether the system performs well and all that. All kinds of work have been done in robust AI. So we need robustness as an important aspect of AI, and reliability is also a very important aspect. Then there is verification validation. Is the system right? The system which I have built, is it functioning as per the specifications? So you look at, in traditional AI systems, you look at subsumption, okay, between rules, redundancies, inconsistencies, circularities. You test for structural completeness. You check for violated semantic constraints, and you do a lot of verification tests. Then you do a lot of validation tests. Is it the right system? That previous one was, is the system right? Is the system which I've developed, is it right as per the specifications? And is it the, in validation, I check if the system which I've developed is the correct kind of system which is required by the user. Okay, so you do a lot of verification, validation. Each of these is a very big, long lecture. Okay, robust AI is a long lecture. Verification, validation is a long lecture. And then there is accountability. So accountability, end-to-end answerability and accountability is very important in AI systems. For example, Tesla's car, okay, ran over somebody and killed the person. Or I think if I remember right, it couldn't make out the difference between a white truck and a white background. It just assumed that there can never be a white truck in a white background, and went and hit somebody. Okay, and there was a problem. Even Google's automated car ran into problem. Who's accountable? For the diabetic retinopathy system rolled out at Shankar Nethralaya, Chennai. Okay, a lot of people go to Shankar Nethralaya. If it gives a wrong decision, who's accountable? Is Google accountable, or Shankar Nethralaya accountable, or the person who used it accountable? Is Sundar Pichai accountable? Who's accountable? So that's a big question. Is auditability? Can I audit how the designers have built the system? Accountability by design. And these are real world issues. Who's accountable? And then we go to the other topic on explainability. Okay. So each of these is a very important topic. I'll just spend more time on explainability. Explainability is the ability of an AI system to explain its decision or prediction. Okay. So basically, can it come when it comes out with the decision or prediction? Can it say that on what features did it base this decision on? Can it explain that? Okay, and it is very useful to determine if a model is trustworthy or not. I would like to know why Google's diabetic retinopathy system, if I give my retinopathy data to it, why does it predict that I'm going to have a heart attack in the next 48 hours? I'd like to know on what basis it is, or at least a doctor would like to know. Okay, I may not like to know that, but a doctor would like to know. So the question is, questions we have on the model's behavior. Why did it do that? Why not something else? When does it succeed? When does it fail? When can I trust the system? And how do I correct an error? So these are some questions which are very important in the explainability area. And now we know that many AI systems have a machine learning and deep learning component in it. And becomes all the more important because definitely Google's Rabbinic retinopathy system is built on deep learning systems. Google's automated car is built on deep learning systems. Tesla's and everything we build nowadays will have a machine learning component, will have may have a traditional AI component. For example, if we have to build an AI system for Indian Army for battlefield surveillance system, okay, it can't be all machine learning based because we just don't have the data points. You know, Indian Army will have to fight 100,000 battles to generate the data points, and we can't do that. Okay, we have to build on whatever data we have and whatever information that there is a lot of military knowledge and all that. That military knowledge cannot be deep learned, so it will be a hybrid system. And it won't be all machine learned system. You can't, if you build only a machine learning system, it's going to be a disaster. And similarly for many domains, it cannot be all machine learning. So some part will be, you know, explicit knowledge, some part will be based on semantic technology, some part will be based on machine learning, some part will be based on case-based reasoning and pattern-based reasoning. There's lots of things. And again, all these questions come very important. Because the Indian Army, if I build a system for Indian Army, how can I trust that system? If that system should be robust, it should be reliable, it should be explainable to the commander why it is saying that go attack in this sector. Okay. And what happens? When does it succeed? When does it fail? So that they know that, oh, in this condition it will fail. So then they can not rely on the system or they can take their own independent actions and all that. So explainability approaches have had the following broad 5 areas: shadow model methods, database methods, model activation methods, causal explanations, and counterfactuals. So shadow model methods is basically you construct an interpretable model that replicates the original model. I'll quickly explain this. So we got another 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, we should end up. Right, I've got another 15 minutes, right? Is that Dr. Sarika Jain?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I will quickly talk about LIME, which is a shadow model method. Database methods, there is interpretable decision sets. And also we have done some work on formal concept analysis based approaches. Okay, FCA stands for formal concept analysis. Then model activation methods is GradCam, basically gradient based class activation maps. So you have classes, you find the activation maps for the classes, and then you can use gradients to find out where those activations are taking place. Then you have causal explanations, and DoWhy is a Microsoft tool which constructs a causal graph, and counterfactuals, example based reasoning. You can give counter examples and find out. Okay, so explainability and interpretability are two different things. Okay, a lot of people make the mistakes thinking that explainable is the same as interpretable. A lot of people think that one is subset of another. They are two different things. Explainable is, but they are interrelated. Explainable system is that it can say that I came out with this prediction. Let us say it came out with this prediction because these neurons got activated. Let us say second, third, and fourth neuron got activated. So it came out with this class prediction. Let's say it says that. It makes no sense to a doctor. If I say the third neuron, fourth neuron, and fifth neuron got activated, so that's why it said that this person is going to have this diabetes. It makes no sense. Okay, so it's not an interpretable model. Explainability is one thing. Interpretability is interpretable in the domain. Okay, so that the it's interpretable. So essential criterion for explanations is that it should be interpretable by the person for whom it is intended. If it is intended for model engineers, then they would like to know, okay, it was based on these weights and these activations and all that. So I may introduce one more hidden layer, or I may introduce some more, say, convolution layers, etc., etc. I can do all those things. So interpretability, and they are related. It should provide qualitative understanding between input variables. Interpretability must also take into account the user's context. Limitations here means context. Okay, I'm just using different word here, or context. And you can have a linear model or a gradient vector or an additive model may not be interpretable. Okay, if hundreds of thousands of features are contributing significantly to a prediction, it is not reasonable to expect any user to understand why the prediction was made. If I say all this 5,000 neurons, predicted that this person is going to have diabetes, then it makes no sense to the people. Okay, so the derived characteristics for explainers. Explanation should be easy to understand, and notion of interpretability depends on the target audience. Okay, a cardiologist may require different explanations as compared to MBBS doctor. An MBBS doctor, it might say, oh, there are two P waves. Whereas for a cardiologist, it might say it has to say sinus arrhythmia or something like that, bicardial rhythm. So there's a different arterial fibrillation. It might have to say at that level. So if it says arterial fibrillation to a patient, the patient is not going to understand anything. But where a cardiologist is going to understand that. Okay, and he wants explanations at that level. So so it has to be at the level of the user, and it should also ensure that fidelity. Fidelity is the prediction by the explanation system is as good as a prediction by the real system. So line was invented, local interpretable model agnostic explanation. So basically what it is intuition is basically, so let me go to this diagram. Suppose this is the model which is predicting something as positive. So this is my area of interest. Okay. So what I do is I put this positive prediction is because of some input features. I perturb the input features and find the negative predictions and the positive predictions by the model, and then construct a linear classifier, a separate linear classifier, and can then explain the model. So what I do is I take a model of interest, I take a prediction of interest in line, I take a prediction of interest, perturb the input features and see what its predictions are. I generate a new data set and then learn a linear classifier, and then use the linear classifier to explain the initial black box model. So that's what is line. Okay, line intuition is, it is model agnostic. Line learns the behavior of the underlying model by perturbing the input values of the feature of prediction. Feature of interest. Input values for the prediction of interest, and then learn a linear classifier. So it perturbs the original instance and learns a linear classifier, and use that to explain the black box model. Okay, and the assumptions are that every model is linear on a local scale. That is usually it's a restriction, but that assumption is pretty acceptable because every complex model, every complex function is linear in a small short neighborhood, right? So this is the overall approach for each prediction to explain. Permute the observation n times. Let the complex model predict the outcomes for all the permitted observations. Calculate the distance from the original observation through a similarity score, and select the n best features and create a new model and extract the feature weights from the simple model and use that as an explanation. Then they invented something called SP line, submodular picks, okay, which is to pick out other areas in that explanation. So you picked out one prediction of interest, and then you may have to pick out other predictions of interest. And class activation maps, this is model inspection methods. So LIME is basically post hoc method. Okay, it doesn't do anything with the model. It only uses the model for prediction. Then you have class activation maps, which is you take a deep neural network and remove the fully connected layer, the last layer. Okay, let us say it's a convolution CNN, and you have the last fully connected layer. You remove that, and then you use global average pooling to find out the class activations. Okay, what is actually triggering a particular class of prediction. Okay, and then you have GradCam, which uses gradient flowing information to the last convolution layer of CNN. Okay, so you don't remove the fully connected layer. In the CNN architecture, you know that you have the CNN convolution layers, and then you have a fully connected layer. Let's say the last layer is the fully connected layer, and you take a particular class of interest, and then you backpropagate the gradients. Okay, you backpropagate the gradients and find out the activations. Okay, so that's about some of the explainability methods, and interpretability is explaining an algorithm's model decision or behavior with respect to a particular user domain knowledge. So you have to look at domain concepts, and you have to look at the context and audience. So you will have to do the explanations with respect to the particular context and the kind of expectations with respect to that. So there is model-based interpretability and post-hoc interpretability, and one can use different methods for these kind of interpretability. Okay, then for example, a statistician may want to look at p-values, significance, statistical metrics, whereas a geneticist may want to look at which genes are correlated. If you just tell the statistician, if you tell the geneticist that the p-values and all that, they can't make out. If we can tell the geneticist that these are the genes which are correlated and part of the same pathway or not, okay, genetic pathway or not, then the geneticist will be interested. A doctor doesn't want to, may not want to see at that level, may want to look at what is it targeting a particular set of hormones or not, etc., etc. Okay, or the kind of side effects and the reactions which it's going to have. So this is all very important areas. Okay, so another few minutes I'll stop. So before that, I'll give you a brief on some of the toolkits. So IBM Fairness 360 is an open source toolkit, okay, where they have integrated a lot of bias detection, fairness algorithms, and other things which you can try. So it contains over 70 fairness metrics and 10 state-of-the-art bias mitigation algorithms. And of course, this has been enhanced. So this is slightly dated slide. And they have something called IBM Watson OpenScale. Okay, IBM Watson OpenScale is an open platform designed by IBM Watson to monitor fairness within a context of other model attributes. And IBM has a lot of research papers in this area. So these are some of the IBM papers, some, I mean, there are many, many more papers which are published. Then Google also has a tool called What If tool. Okay, Google's AI research created something called What If visualization. It reveals how using the What If tools, it reveals certain insights into the system, and it can compare multiple models within the same workflow. There are test algorithms for fairness constraints. So there is a What If tool developed by Google. Accenture has this tool called CogX, where their fairness tool has been developed based on various algorithms, and it looks at certain attributes. You mark those as sensitive, and then you'll find out whether it can influence a decision or not. Okay, Then there are others. Facebook has developed something called Fairness Flow. Microsoft has developed a DoI tool and many other tools. Amazon has also published a lot of work in this direction. So there's lots of work going on, and this area is expanding very rapidly. So trustworthiness is a very important area as AI systems are making decisions that affect individuals, people, groups, organizations, societies, etc. And it's very important that we look at this area very carefully. And we are surrounded by AI systems. Okay, if you do online shopping, you have an AI system. If you try to look for a house, you have an AI system underneath, or some ML system underneath it. Okay, many medical systems are becoming AI oriented systems. I mean, there is some machine learning component in it. So it's the trustworthiness is very important. And if we don't look at all the aspects like accountability, auditability, explainability, bias, fairness, robustness, reliability, we are not doing a good justice to the system. And it's very important because it's going to influence people and it's going to affect their lives. And it may have different reactions, you know. Some people may get very upset, some may, I mean, there can be drastic actions and all that. So it's very important as technical people for us to address this area. And this area is very hot and evolving. Huge amount of papers are coming in. Lots of work is happening very rapidly. The area is moving very, very fast. And it has all the technologies that you can think of. Semantic web intelligence is going to be one part of it. I think you have a lecture in semantic explainability later on. Okay, so these are some of the references. Why should I trust you by Sameer Singh and this Ribeiro and Sameer Singh is a very quoted paper. This is where they explained about line, and there are other papers. Okay, and of course this AI Fairness 360 and lots of other papers on bias mitigation processing and many other papers are coming. So thank you very much. And if there's any questions, comments, observations, any kind of things that you'd like to say, I'm welcome. Thank you.
Sir, can you give us an example of interpretable result, like maybe from Lime or something?
Yeah. So interpretable, see, the thing is, as I told you, suppose we make an AI system for ECG diagnosis, okay? Okay, so ECG diagnosis, if I make a system, and for the doctor, for MBBS doctor, it is at one level, for cardiologist, it is at other level. So it has to be interpretable to the cardiologist. It has to be interpretable to the MBBS doctor. Okay, the cardiologists, they talk in a different terminology. Okay, they talk about arrhythmia, arterial fibrillation. They talk about sinus bicardial rhythm, and all kinds of things. An MBBS doctor will talk about the peaks. Okay, so many peaks and heartbeats and all that. The patient is at a completely normal ECG, not normal ECG. So explainability is different for different things. So interpretable for the domain. So if I just a sec, I'm just trying to see where is that. Yeah, yeah. So if I build an explanation system which says that this hidden layer created the problem, it's not going to make sense to a cardiologist at all. So it has to come out with explanations which says that, okay, bicardial rhythm, sinus bicardia, okay, is like this and all that, and I'll be looking at this arterial fibrillation, this is what happens, this is P wave, this, that, and all that. For a doctor, it is different, okay? For a patient, it is different and all that. For a model builder, it might say, okay, this particular prediction, which is this class, okay, or this class which is occurring is because of this layer or these activations and all that. So that's interpretable.
So thank you for such a wonderful lecture. My query is that do we have established guidelines to test machine learning applications? I mean, do we have guidelines to test the machine learning applications similar to the guidelines we do have for the normal software, like black box, white box, that kind
Similar
of
to
traditional software?
Yeah, so I am part of this Indian national, that is BIS, Bureau of Indian Standards, and I'm also part of the International Standards Organization, ISO. Okay,
Sure.
Organization of International Standardization, and we are coming out with standards in AI. Okay, at the national level and at the international level. So there, a lot of work is going on. If you become part of it, you can also contribute, provided the BIS includes you. Okay, so there we are trying to come up with guidelines for AI systems, guidelines for trustworthy systems. What is trustworthiness, robustness, bias, fairness, accountability, ethics? Lots of things is going on. And at the Indian national level also, we are coming out. Professor Pushpak Bhattacharya, IIT Bombay professor, is the chairman of the Indian Standardization Committee, which is a mirror of the International Standardization Committee. And lots of work is going on in that direction. But other organizations have come out, like IEEE has come out with some guidelines, I think, then similarly, other organizations also coming out.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll stop sharing my screen. Stop sharing.
Thank you so much, sir. I hope there are no more queries for the time being. Though I feel there will be lot of queries when the participants will revisit the session. They'll read it again into deep. It was a very nice session, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir, for being here. And on a very short notice, with you all already have a lecture now. After a few minutes from now. It is 2 parts you have been speaking. Thank you so much for the wonderful session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Whenever you feel free, please rejoin us for further sessions also.
Yeah. I'll continue attending for some time and then I'll break off.
Definitely, sir. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Dear participants, we'll be starting our next session at sharp 11:45, and it is about neurosymbolic approaches, which is the most important hybrid approach to artificial intelligence in today's date. So I'm waiting for that to happen. Be with us. Bye-bye for now.